Michael with the implementation staff at IndySoft, and today I'm going to be creating a report in order to capture the standards used for items that are currently scheduled on a work order. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to assume that the work order was created through some kind of receiving-like event that generates a work order and populates the current work order field. Additionally, we might find if an item has been calibrated multiple times across the past, we may also include those standards just to see what people have done over time. This is more for your on-site technicians to potentially be packing for a job. And so what I've done is I'm already in Print Builder and a custom report that I've created. Right now there is nothing in this report. It is just a created one, and we're going to start by building the data pipeline. So within the custom reports, we have to establish what our data pipeline is going to be for what we are creating. To begin, we can go to File and New. And generally, I do like using the Query Designer over the Query Wizard. This one just allows me to go back and forth a little bit quicker. Within here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to scroll down until we get to the Events section. Because what we're going to be looking for is all the entries into the Trace2 table. Trace2 table is what stores all of our master associations to our calibration type events. Once we have our Trace2, we're also going to need to grab the events table. If you notice right now, because we've selected the events-masters table, when we double click on the events table that is bolded currently, it will automatically join that through a pre-selected join type. Now, additionally in here, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and grab our equipment. But this is what may be interesting, is we're going to grab equipment, and this first time what it's going to do, it's going to try and find a table to join it with. We can obviously set those here. We're going to remove these predefined associations and just join our equipment to our events table. This will get us information about the unit under test from this report. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the equipment table again, except this time we're going to associate it back to the events-masters table. We're going to capture our company to our trace company and our ID to our trace ID in order to get information about the actual masters that were used for this calibration event. The next thing we'll do is, now that we've selected our tables, we will get our field section. One thing back here to note on the tables is we do also have a distinct option that can be checked. One thing that I generally do not recommend to people is on the field section to select all fields. This can cause your reports to run a little bit slower, as well as make your drop-down list a little bit more complex in order to navigate. Now, what we'll do in here is I'm going to want the trace company and trace ID of masters. Let's grab the company and the ID of the items that we are looking for the masters for. Let's maybe grab their event date, grab event type, result. And that should be good in terms of our event information we want to see. Next thing is we probably want to see the description and the manufacturer model number of our unit under test. Then we'll keep scrolling down, and if you notice this field SQL alias, right now we're seeing gauges, but once we get into that table that we've added twice, you'll notice that it is now an _2. And so our _2 gauges table is going to contain the information about our masters. We're going to skip over the calculations tab and go straight to the search tab. The calcs tab is where you could do SQL functions. So say, for example, you needed to see just the month of the event date. You could use a date part on the calcs tab in order to capture that. Within our search, what we're going to want to do is we probably want to limit it to just our calibration type events. I'm also going to get event dates that are greater than or equal to, let's say today minus, let's go back 1,200 days. Just so that way I can ensure that I have stuff that this report will return. And then finally, because we discussed in the beginning that we would use the gauge's current work order number that may be set through a receiving event that created the work order, we can come down here and grab our current work order field. And what we could do is, in this case, I know that I'm looking for items on work order 73. And I'll come back in a moment and discuss the auto search and parameter as well. In this case, we do not wish to group any data or do any group search bys, but this would be if you needed to group things by, for example, your company, or maybe you want to group by manufacturer. Next thing we're going to want to do is, just based on the way that I'm going to create the report layout itself, I'm going to want to sort everything based on the trace company first and then the trace ID. Now, one final thing is, as we have built this report within our custom report designer, we can actually see the SQL that is being generated here. One thing that some admins may want to do is, if they had a report that they needed to modify or take a look at, or quickly get something into Excel, you can always copy the SQL out of the SQL tab here and run that in the ISSQL if you're a system administrator. Now that we have all of our information here, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And if I click on my Preview button on my Data tab, you'll notice that I have some items. And if we take a look at what we have returned in here, you'll see apparently I ran a bunch of calibrations on ID 1001 using the same master back in October a few years ago. Then we've got a few other items that we'll return on here. In terms of custom reports, the Data tab, once this is created, we can now go back over to our Design tab and actually populate this with information. One of the ways that I typically will get this started is by going to File and Report Wizard in order to use the Report Wizard in order to quickly assemble our report. So I can go ahead and just grab all my fields. I'll worry about manually ordering them later, but you could also order the fields here too. Now, what I had determined based on my sort order is that I wanted to sort based on the trace company and trace ID. By selecting these here, it will go ahead and auto-create our groups for these items. Next, I also have options for some layouts. I don't generally prefer any of these over another one, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to landscape as well. Same thing in terms of our formatting here. Not a huge preference, but this can be something you can choose yourself. Then we have an option to preview the report or modify the report's design. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select the modify because I want to go over a few other options and finish. You'll notice that the report wizard has gone ahead and created all of our header objects, title, as well as our group information here. So one thing that we will notice is, because we have two fields of the same name in some of these, such as manufacturer, model, and description, we have our to in here as well. So what we might want to do is, if we have our company name of the masters and then we have our ID of the masters, we can take our objects that we have currently placed in the detail band and move these up into their corresponding header section. So I'm going to move those, and that is my other one here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these out, even though it auto-created. This can still be faster than manually entering all of these objects yourself. A few other things is, if you notice, I just selected that object there. I was able to use my Control and up and down key to move that, as well as my Shift key to resize it with the up and down arrows. Now that we have this, we have our company that contains the masters. Then we also have our ID of the masters that were used. Then we're going to see all of our objects that return. So when we hit preview, you'll notice that ABC Company 01000, which is a Fluke 87.5 digital multimeter, was used to calibrate these items according to the trace table. Now, obviously that is not a real calibration, but this allows us to see what all items or events were used in the past with these specific items for this master up here. So each one of these is an independent calibration event, and so this same master was used on each one. Then we also have an additional company down here with our ID of 1,000,008, and it was used on these three IDs here. Now, if within here we wanted to sort everything else, we could also include that in our data sorting. But one thing that I will go ahead and do in here is create a quick parameter. That way we can go back and set our current work order number to search. So we'll call this work order here. As well, I want to go ahead and see a count. So therefore I can use my DB calc, and let's just add that right here. We're going to count the number of events related to each of the trace ID that was used. With this selected, what we can do is we can change our DB calc type on the left side properties, and we want a count. And then also I'm going to go ahead and select count on the gauge SN field. Additionally, if we copy this item and left it in the group footer for the trace company, we would see a count of all the masters used within that company, whereas the group footer trace ID is going to just count the number of events associated with that specific ID. Now, if we go back, since we have right-clicked on parameters, created our work order parameter, we can go back to our data tab, and here what we can do is file and new again. I'm going to go to my query designer one more time. Then I'm going to go ahead and using my keyboard jump down to the work orders tab or table. And then here what we'll do is we'll grab the job number. And then in here we're going to search for, let's only allow the searching of not invoiced work orders. So we can use our not equal to operator and set invoiced in there. Then let's go ahead and sort on our work order number, and we'll use the descending sort here. Now that we have this work orders data set here, we can also go back to our event masters and set our parameter as well as an auto search here. What this will allow us to do is back on the design tab, we can select our work orders parameter and set our data type. There is also another YouTube Tip Tuesday video for this one in particular. But we'll go ahead and set that. And that should be fine there. And so now whenever we hit our preview, this is going to show us all, but we can also come in here and select a work order value from our dropdown. So notice based on our DB calcs, standard 01000 was used for 18 events of items that were associated to this current work order. 1005 was used for just one, and so the number of masters from the ABC company, or number of times utilized of the masters that we have found, was 19. In this particular scenario, we may have wanted to go back, let's just say 400 days, and then we wouldn't see all of these duplicate items in this test database on this 1001 item calibration here. Additionally, under the report section and the groups, we could also set these to create a new page on each one of those group breaks. So please be aware that you can manually define your groups under the report and groups, as well as a few different options within here. A few other tips is ensuring that on the view you have your align or space and size options visible. And what these allow you to do is using your shift key multi-select items, and then I could make sure that all of those are aligned left, or in this case maybe I'll go center. That way everything is going to be aligned relative to the initial selection that I've chosen. Additional DB objects can be added through the standard database field section up here, as well as any of the fixed text fields here. So for example, right now we don't actually have what our current work order is that is chosen. So what we may want to do is use a system variable that we can then set the variable type to the search description. That way, whenever we select our preview, we will see what our current search description is that we have chosen for this report that has come out. Additionally, we can see here that we have our new page. And the reason that we're not seeing that search description on the second page is because this events_masters section is within the title band. So if for whatever reason we wanted to include everything that is in the title section on every page, instead we would move that into the header object, which will appear at the top of every page unless these right-click options are selected. So what we could do if we wanted that to appear on every page is move that into the header. If we didn't want any of the header information to appear on the first page, we also have this right-click to not print on the first page. Additionally, we also have group headers and group footers. These will be sorted based upon the data set and can be adjusted there. The detail band will then include all of the lines that are found from our database selection off the data tab that this report is linked with. Within the design tab as well, we have the footer, which will appear at the bottom of every page, unless you select the print on first or print on last. One thing with this report right now is it does not have a summary section visible. One key thing to note on the summary is it is kind of like the title. It will appear at the bottom of the last page, but it will appear above the footer. One thing that you could also do is use this align bottom property and not print a footer on the last page if you had information that you wanted to combine similar to the way that the title and the header may interact. If you have any other questions in regards to special reporting or the use of Print Builder, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.